So I put together this beautiful proposal, very visually stunning, with examples of my previous work. And essentially, I kind of never heard back from her again. I followed up. Oh, we decided to go in a different direction. Oh, yeah, we received it. I'll circle back. She never circled back. So then I went to a mutual friend, a friend that had introduced us. And I said, hey, did I charge too much for that? She was like, nah, these are rich women. If anything, you should have charged more. So again, I feel like using my third eye, I feel like they expected me to do that work for much less. I guarantee you, if my price was low, I would still be doing work for that company. Welcome to BLAXIT to Africa. My name is Tadre Delora Moignet, a California native living her best life in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much for coming along for the ride. I hope that you are informed, entertained, and inspired to BLAXIT to Africa. First, let me apologize for the delay. It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without a dope beat to step to. Shout out to Eric B. and Rakim. If you know, you know. I have been traveling to Uganda. I went to a traditional wedding in Mbarara. One of my girlfriends was getting married there. And life just caught up with me. I had a pretty bad skating accident, so I've been down for the count, but now I'm back. In this episode, we're going to be discussing the downside of being an expat. So often people glamorize and they talk about how wonderful it is to relocate out of the global north or to just move someplace different. But not enough is said about the downside of being an expat. And while overall, I would definitely say that living abroad, leaving the United States permanently, has been one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, particularly coming to Nairobi, Kenya. But there are some things that are just like, I wish things were different. So there is no utopian community. There is no perfect place on the planet, but we can get close, right? So as usual, I have my notes in front of me so that I can stay on target because Auntie can veer off target. But I just want to share a few of the things with you that I personally find to be the downside of being an expat. Oh, and let's just talk about this one thing, expat versus immigrant. I don't care what you call me. You can call me an immigrant, you can call me an expat. There's quite a bit of debate about who we are, what that means, what's the difference between an expat and an immigrant. It's pretty much the same thing, right? However, expat, expatriate, there's a general connotation that if you're an expat, you're of a higher class, you are welcome in the country, you got a good job, right? Your paperwork is in order. More than likely, you're of European descent, or we'll just say white European descent. And if you're an immigrant, it's like you're poor, you're unwanted, you might be illegal, So we can debate that maybe on another episode. But me personally, I realize I'm a guest in this country. And you want to call me an immigrant, you want to call me an expat, it's up to you. Okay? So the first downside about being an expat or an immigrant is that you fall in love with people and then they leave. We tend to be these very adventurous, exploratory people, and like attracts like. And so then you meet these other adventurous, exploratory individuals and you fall in love with them. And I mean like platonic relationships, romantic relationships, whatever it may be. You spend a lot of time with them, you get to know them, and then they be out on the next journey, the next adventure. And I'm like, I'm so happy for you because you're moving on with your life and you're continuing in this path of exploration. But I'm sad because I'm gonna miss you. So I would say that that's probably the number one downfall. I actually read that on someone's blog, and they were exactly right. And, being away from your tribe, your friends, and your family, it becomes important because we are social beings to establish a new tribe. So you establish a new tribe and you moving around the country together and you're sharing in similar experiences, and then they be like, yeah, deuces. The second thing that I would say is a downside of being an expat is it's like you're moving to a new country and you're a baby again. And if you're someone that likes change, and I do like change, I like adventure, that can also be an upside because everything is new, everything is fresh, and you're in the present, right? But it can be a little bit of an inconvenience. Like you have to learn a new way of being. You have to figure out, who your service providers are going to be, what the best products are. And it's something like when you grow up in the same place, you always know like Tide or All is your favorite detergent. This is going to be your, Jergens or whatever you use is your favorite skincare, whatever your favorite hair care product is. When you come to a new country, like I had to Google what's the best toilet paper in Kenya. And the product that came up as number one, like I wasn't really feeling it. These are just inconveniences, figuring out which way to cross the street or which way to look first before you cross the street. In Kenya, you gotta look right first. Which side of the road to drive on, who you can trust. In the previous episodes, I talked about, the things that annoy me about Kenya. And, I focused on these fundis, these service providers or carpenters who really be trying to get over at every turn. If I was at home, I would have been figured that out because I probably would have gone to the fundi that my parents had gone to or my friends had gone to. But when you're establishing new friends and some of those friends are not from the place, you're kind of at a disadvantage. Learning how things are done, right? In the States, every state has a different process for securing housing, real estate, whether you're buying or you're renting. The same in Kenya, and Zanzibar for that matter. So I lived in Zanzibar and they wanted you to pay like 6 months rent up front, which explains why a lot of people just live in really, I would say, squalid conditions, on top of the fact that the structures in Zanzibar are typically very old. So when I first got this place, I recall they needed a reference. And I don't ever recall having to give a reference to move into any place in the States, whether I was renting or buying. What else? Yeah, and then I think they wanted like first, last, and then current, which is not bad, But then one of the shockers for me was that when you move into a new place, right, and you're renting, you got to put in all the appliances, the drapes, the light fixtures, which in most parts of the US, that is not something you have to do. So I had to get new drapes, I had to get light fixtures, I have to buy a refrigerator, I had to buy a stove. And even when I replaced one of the light fixtures, I was not reimbursed for it. So that was a shock. So just learning how things get done. And then people talk about Kenya being really corrupt. I don't think Kenya is an anomaly. There's a lot of corruption in states. It's just not, maybe we're more used to it. Maybe it's not as in your face. Like, we don't just give the police money. It's not expected that when we get stopped, we just give the police money. I would say in East Africa in general, when you're stopped, that's the reason why you're being stopped. That's the reason you're being stopped, for a bribe, you know? So again, learning how things get done, knowing where to shop for things, right? So there's a lot of supermarkets here in Kenya, and Naivas, Chandarana, Carrefour, figuring out like what's your favorite place. Since I have lived abroad for several years and shopped at the most amazing markets, I prefer a smaller market. So I prefer Chandarana, which is kind of similar to Trader Joe's in the US. It's a small market. And I like going where people know me, where people recognize me, where, just seeing familiar faces. And I recall listening to this podcast, and they were saying that, the richness of your life is really not so much defined by your family, but really the people that you encounter every day. So the relationships you have with your guard, with your bartender, with your hairstylist, with the people that you see at the metro stop, etc., etc. And then, for me, like living in a place where the price is not on the products, okay, all the time, not knowing what the price of something should be, that's definitely a downside. Because, for instance, these braids, I think it's just 5 little braids here with extensions and beads. I went to Kenyatta Market, which is a place in Nairobi that's known for its magnificent braiders. You will never come out of Kenyatta Market looking like you've been set up, okay? Now, you have to bargain, okay? So when I showed her a picture of what I wanted, first off, she was like 1,000 shillings. Oh my God. When I told Kenyans how much for these few little braids, they lost it. I mean, lost it. And I was like, oh. So I said, well, I think these should be 500. Sis was like, all right, let's at least do 6. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to haggle with you over 100 shillings, which is the equivalent to $1. And then, like, I liked them so much, and I was very particular about the beading, etc. I ended up just giving her 1,000 shillings, 1 GP, which is the equivalent to about $8 US. For the average Kenyan, that is too much. Like, the kids that I work with at the skate park, they was like, you should have paid 100 shillings for that. That's less than $1. But I do think that there are levels, right? Because if I go to Spritz Salon, which is a higher end salon, I'm going to pay more. If I go to Kenyatta Market, I should pay a little bit less. However, coming from the United States, where people are paying $250 to $2,000 for some braids, for some temporary lock extensions, $8, like, I feel like I'm winning. So I guess I'm winning, and Kamene at Kenyatta Market, she winning too. So negotiating those prices, not really knowing what the prices are, and I want to pay the local price most of the time. At the same time, I'm not going to haggle with you over 50 shillings, over 100 shillings. I just kind of want to get in and out. I think that that's one of the signature characteristics of Americans. We like convenience. We like to do things real quick. And the patience that is required to negotiate, I don't always have the patience for that. Then number 3, I touched on this a little bit. Being away from loved ones. For a lot of people, that would probably be number 1. I'm an only child. I'm my mother's only child. Let me clarify that. I do have a half sister on my father's side. And I'm also an introvert that can be an extrovert. So this thing is not too tough for me. I also come from a really small family. My girls, though, like my home girls, that has been tough. Because you move someplace new, it's beautiful, you're experiencing all these wonderful things, and the only person you can share it with is yourself. The only person you can really talk to about is really with yourself. You can only describe it to other people. And so, spending quality time with people who understand me, who know me, we have history. It's been tough being away from them. But again, as I spoke about in number 1, falling in love with transient people and then they leave, you build your own tribe. And I can say that I do have a tribe of women here in Nairobi that I consider to be really cool friends, and we can vibe on multiple levels. But you got to make new friends. You got to build trust with new people. You have to find your tribe. The building trust with new people is interesting because I'll meet people who, let's say they're Kenyan, and they think I'm cool, but I'm being auditioned, to see, like, how cool am I? Can I introduce you to my tribe? Will you be a good fit in my tribe? Like, I experienced that a lot, particularly in Uganda. Zanzibar was a bit tough in terms of finding my tribe because, to be perfectly honest with you, the white North Americans, white Europeans, they really wasn't trying to fuck with me. They were curious about me, but they weren't trying to fuck with me like that. And there were very few Black Americans on the island, and not that I need to be around Black Americans or Black people to vibe, but typically when you meet people of your same tribe, you're more likely to vibe. Now, Zenji women, Zanzibari women, I'm going to say this generally speaking, and I hope not to offend anyone. Their place is in the home, right? So they're not going to be out at the bars. They can't be out at the bars. They can't be out at the clubs. They can't be out. You know what I'm saying? And then to invite this infidel into your home, someone who is non-Muslim, someone who is single, this woman with this big age, and she ain't got no husband, she ain't got no kids. Like, that was kind of, I did have one friend, one Zenji friend, who lived across the road from me. And also the language barrier, right? So there's only so many things that I could talk about with her in Swahili. And her English was just like pretty much non-existent. But the way that we would communicate was with our food. So she would make food, and then she had the kids come over and get me and not go to her house and eat. And then I would make food and I would bring it over for her to try. And then one day I went out with her like fishing, or it was almost like a scavenger hunt, because when the tide got really low, we walked for miles out into the ocean, just picking up little mollusks, right? Buckets full that she would then extract and boil up into a nice curry tomato based sauce over some rice with vegetables. Bomb. But I say all that to say that finding your tribe can be difficult depending on where you are. And I feel like Kenyans are good on a tribe. You know, just kind of like no new friends. In a way, like I got my people, I got my family, I got my age mates, my colleagues that I fuck with, my homegirls, you know, my schoolmates, and then here you are, and like I'm good. So it's been a bit difficult for me to meet women friends in Kenya, or Kenyan women friends, because I do have girlfriends here and most of them are not Kenyan. Meeting men, that's really easy. Uganda was different because Uganda's actually rated as the friendliest country in the world. Ugandans are kind for no good reason, just polite because that's the culture. And I would just meet somebody out at a bar, at a lounge, and exchange phone numbers, and they call me the next day, let's hang out. As an American, that's kind of like, oh, because we are really like no new friends. You know, we don't really bring people into the circle unless we just like really want that person in the circle and we're really deliberate and intentional. But in Uganda, it's like no big deal. Number 4, the downside of being an expat. Number 4, establishing yourself in a new market, perhaps even a new career. So it's been difficult to figure out how much to charge for my services. For instance, when I lived in Uganda and I was approached to style a fashion brand, and this Ugandan fashion brand, they said, we like your style and we think that you would be great to style our new collection. Number 1, I had never styled a fashion brand. Number 2, I didn't know how much to charge in the Ugandan market. I could guesstimate how much I would charge in, let's say, Los Angeles or New York, but in Kampala. So sis ended up paying me what I would consider small money, but it was my first time. I was excited, I was happy, right? And I met new people. One time I was even paid in clothes. There's one of my favorite stores in Kampala, I won't say the name, and I would go in and the customer service was just horrible. I'm a customer service trainer. It's not something that I advertise. I was like, look, I like this place. I want sis to win, and we got to do something about this customer service. And so she was like, okay, cool. I would love to hire you to come in and train my staff. How much do you charge? I told her how much I would charge. I wasn't sure about how much to charge because, again, we're talking about Kampala, a different market. I gave her my price. She was like, ooh, that's a bit much. I was like, but you know what? I like what y'all got. You could pay me in clothes. How about that? Pay me in clothes and accessories. And that's how we work that out. But, you know, you're not always going to be able to barter. So what do, right? There was another situation I had in Kenya where a sis came to me. She was a corporate exec, C-suite, And she also mentored other women who were corporate execs who were making their way up that corporate ladder. And she said, listen, these women want a makeover. They say they want me to mentor them, but at the end of the day, I realize what they really want is a makeover of their CV, their corporate photos, etc. How much would you charge? So I put together this beautiful proposal, very visually stunning, with examples of my previous work. And essentially, I kind of never heard back from her again. I followed up. Oh, we decided to go in a different direction. Oh, yeah, we received it. I'll circle back. She never circled back. So then I went to a mutual friend, the friend that had introduced us. And I said, hey, did I charge too much for that? She was like, nah, these are rich women. If anything, you should have charged more. So again, I feel like using my third eye, I feel like they expected me to do that work for much less. I guarantee you, if my price was low, I would still be doing work for that company, for that entity. And what happens when you are starting a new career? I know people who are looking for work in Kenya, and they've essentially resigned themselves to knowing that they're going to be paid much less than what they would be paid in Finland, in North America, et cetera, et cetera. And it really is going to depend on your industry. But I would imagine, breaking into the marketing industry here would be tough because number one, you don't speak the language. And number two, you don't have the contacts here. You're basically just out here winging it based on what you've done in the States, who you know in the States or wherever you're coming from. So that would be another downside. The fifth and final downside of being an expat is learning a new language. I feel like that's also a positive, depending on how good you are with languages and really just how curious you are about culture. The downside, of course, is, it takes time, it takes practice, consistency, and you must be intentional if you want to learn a new language. And it's interesting being in Kenya because I be speaking Kiswahili to folks and they respond in English. Like they'll laugh and respond in English. I've never lived anywhere where people just laugh at you in your face when you speak in a language and correctly most of the time. Granted, it's not the right accent. Sometimes I'm slow, and apparently I'm speaking like Tanzanian Swahili because actually that's what I'm learning. I'm learning Tanzanian Swahili, which is like the proper Swahili, quote unquote. But still, like, they be quick to laugh in my face, but that does not stop me. I'll say nyaje, which is more like shang, which is a slang, and they'll answer back with hello. Jumbo. And Jumbo is such a diss. Jumbo is like what they teach foreigners when you're learning a language. Jumbo, si Jumbo. They say that a lot in Zanzibar, but Jumbo is really not something that is said here in Kenya. So I know, like, if I say to someone, habari yako, mambo, and they respond with Jumbo, it's a diss. But nonetheless, every day I get up and I do my little 10 minutes on Duolingo and I keep it pushing. Kenya, I'll just say Nairobi makes it a bit difficult to learn Kiswahili because damn near everybody in Nairobi speaks English and speaks it well. Uganda, I went back to Uganda recently for a wedding, as I stated previously, and I was surprised how I was able to just rock with Swahili with a certain generation. You know, millennial Ugandans don't really speak much Swahili, but you know, Gen X, baby boomers, they speak Kiswahili or at least understand, you know? Um, so yeah, learning a language, that would be, I would say that's a downside of being an expat, but it can also be fun, you know? And you know, they say the best way to learn a language is to have a lover that speaks that language. And I'm just going to leave that right there. All in all, I would say that if you're an adventurous spirit, if you're a curious being, you will love living in Africa. And you know what? I wouldn't trade it for the world. Thank you for joining me on this episode of BLAXIT to Africa. May you thrive, may you move with love and intention. Until next time.